Hi, it's Doug Coy with God's Got It Israel, and I'm here with one of the most fascinating people I've met in a long time, Kelvin Crombie. Now, Kelvin, you're Australian, but for some unknown reason, you ended up spending 25 years of your life in Israel. How'd that happen?
Well, as I was a young fella, I became interested in Israel because of Australia's military involvement in the Middle East. With the First and Second World War, Australian soldiers fought in the Eastern Mediterranean, all the way from Gallipoli around in Turkey, all the way around to Libya. And in both World Wars, we were involved in the land of Israel. And I had uncles in the Second World War who had been in that region. And one uncle in particular had been based there in Palestine, as it was called then, Israel of today. And he then died at a place called Tobruk in Libya in 1941. And as a young fellow, I was always interested in this man, why he was there, and more so, why Australian soldiers were there during the First and Second World War. In the First World War, Australians on horseback were there, known as the light horse. And so I wanted to know. At the same time as I was intrigued in this family connection, an Israeli family came to live in a farm. And now I'm from a fairly remote area of Australia. And we never saw foreigners at all, but an Israeli family came to live there for a couple of years, and I got to know the kids, got to know of Israel through them. And I was so interested in the whole subject matter that as a young fella, I was reading about the Holocaust, even at the age of 8, 9, 10, 11. So,
Wow.
I mean, tell me which country boys in Australia would be studying those subjects.
Yeah,
so obviously,
exactly.
there was a thing or two going on in my life that I was completely oblivious to. And by the age of 12, I somehow knew that I'd go to Israel. I told somebody at the age of 15 I'd go to live in Israel. Now, I'm not from a Jewish background at all. There's no reason to even think I would want to be, because... and I was from no Christian background either. So it was a totally, supernatural connection going on in my life, even then, well before I even knew God personally. At the age of 21, I went to live in Israel. I went to a kibbutz, the northern part of Israel.
What was that like?
Well, that was fascinating. It was really right up the very, very north of Israel. And while I was there, I wanted to become an Israeli, because I could feel there was something significant about Israel, something that was very compelling, and I wanted to be part of it.
But it wasn't necessarily a spiritual thing.
Well, if you'd asked me at the time, I would have said no. But what I did know before I left Australia in 1978, I knew there had to be an answer to life, and I knew I'd find it in Israel. So that was the magnet that was pulling me there. So I wanted to go to Israel. I knew there had to be something more to life than playing football and cricket. Okay? Cricket, do you hear that?
Yeah.
And but when I got to Israel, I realised life was more than just about sport and women and booze. There had to be some other dimension. And at that stage, I wanted to become an Israeli. I thought of going into the army and all that sort of stuff. So I actually contemplated seriously at one stage converting to Judaism. Now that fell through, because I became quite aware of what is actually involved in converting to Judaism. I won't go into all the details.
No.
But I fell into a hole at that stage. I had a goal, and suddenly the goal was taken away. So how am I going to live in Israel? Right at that juncture, a Christian girl came from Orange County in Los Angeles, and began to tell me about Jesus. And I said, Jesus, what's it going to do with it? I'm in Israel. I'm not interested in Jesus.
Yeah, what's Jesus got to do with Israel?
I didn't know then that Jesus was Jewish.
Oh my!
Right? I might have known it there, but it didn't mean anything.
Yeah.
And we went to a place called the Garden Tomb.
Been there.
Garden Tomb, and it was Easter Sunday, 1981, and the minister preaching that day was the minister from Christchurch in Jerusalem, as part of the ministry of CMJ. I didn't know anything about CMJ. I didn't know anything about Christchurch. All I could see was a man up there with a dog collar. But he preached about Jesus being a Jew, the Jewish Jesus, and his whole sermon was about that. And that really was what turned me around, basically. I didn't repent then and there and confess my faith in Jesus. That took a few months later in England. But the beginning point was when I saw Jesus in his true light, basically, as a Jew. That was what really made me interested in who this Jesus was. So I came to faith in July of 1981, and I went to live in Jerusalem thereafter. I was in London for a couple of months, went back to Jerusalem. And in time, I started off working at various hospitals as nurses' aides. I met my wife while I was with Lexi while I was working in one hospital. But then we began to attend this Christchurch in Jerusalem in 1984.
Now this is quite the church, because this has been, you talk about history.
Yeah.
This is history.
This is history. This is bound up with the modern history of Jerusalem. So for that reason, on a yearly basis, there are thousands and thousands of Israelis, particularly academics, who go to visit this church inside the old city of Jerusalem. An Anglican church built to resemble a synagogue. Why would people go there? because it's synonymous to the beginnings of the modern restoration of Israel.
Wow.
Because the people who established that were visionaries. You know, they were Anglican ministers, and people might think Anglicans, what could come out of Anglicanism? Well, in those days, in the 19th century, there was a strong revival in the Anglican Church, and many of those people, William Wilberforce, Lord Shaftesbury, all these people had an interest in the Jewish people and had a belief system in different forms, yes, but still a belief system that God had not finished with the nation of Israel, and they would come back, that Jewish people would come to know the Messiah, Jesus, and so on and so forth. So if there was one building in Jerusalem, in Israel, that represents this whole story of restoration, it is Christchurch.
Wow.
And that's where I ended up by going, and in 1986 I came onto staff there as the guide. The next thing I know, I'm actually having to tell this story to people who are coming in to visit.
Wow. So now you're involved in something current. It's a well, tell me what it is. It's a history museum type of thing in Israel, going back over history. What is that all about?
Well, we began to, because we saw the interest, particularly of Israelis, in this history, we realized that here was an opportunity of us being able to share with them what is really our faith, which is belief in Jesus and coming into a personal covenant relationship with Him. But the avenue by which we could do that was through history. So for instance, all this history came about because people had a belief system. What was that belief system? To come to Jerusalem, to come to Israel, and to introduce Jewish people to Jesus as Messiah. So the history came as a result of a belief system, of conviction. So we thought, well, let's establish museums. And so from that early period, from 1986 onwards, that's what I began to do. I began to collect materials. In a time we established 4 museums. CMJ has 4 centres in Israel, 2 in Jerusalem, the Anglican School, Christchurch, 1 in Tel Aviv, Jaffa, or Bet Emmanuel, which actually was the home of Baron Ustinov, who was Peter Ustinov's grandfather.
Oh my.
An incredible connection there. And in the Sea of Galilee is a place called Bet Lacha. So in those places we established little museums or centres, we call them heritage centres, and Israelis would come to visit, they'd see the history, and then they'd also see and hear about the reason why there is a history.